Evernote.
Hello, Pride 48. This is DJ Starsage of the Faraway Nearby, and I will shortly be joined by the Duchess Sue. Um, Her handmaidens are assisting her in getting ready.
Okay.
And for those of you viewing the video on YouTube, I am having my 2-hour snack right now. This is part of my keto diet. It is Greek yogurt with fruit and almonds and a little bit of cinnamon. Now, the key, of course, with this diet is low sugar. So if you get yogurt, it's not going to be the prepackaged kind like Yoplait or Dannon or whatever, because those have a ton of sugar in them, even if they're the light varieties. You have to buy, oftentimes, the store brand Greek yogurt in a big tub, and then you just portion it out per your diet. And I like to put cinnamon in mine because it gives that a little bit of extra taste. So it won't be a couple minutes. The Duchess is just unloading her purchases for the day. She just arrived by carriage, and her handmaidens are assisting her. So it looks like we have myself and the Duchess. We also have the Shy Yeti and Toppy Smelly. Thank you, gentlemen, for being our regulars. I know we can always count on you. And when you're not here in person, we know you're here in spirit. We also have a Mib in the chat room, and they've actually just changed to veritable Virgo. So, okay, welcome. We'll just be a couple more moments, and we will get underway. Let's see what the weather is out like here in not quite Apple country. It's been overcast, and let's see. Trying to see what the actual weather says it is. We've had rain the last few days, on and off. I'd say it's probably fair to say that it's in the 80s here, early 80s. It's been hotter, but in more recent days, it's cooled down a bit. And to the east of me, we've had some pretty terrible storms, at least thunderstorms that rained cats and dogs. And Fair Duchess, if you could let me know, should you be a little bit longer?
I shouldn't be much longer. Did you see the message over here on the right?
Oh, okay. Let me check in our little Orphan Annie secret decoder room.
It's true. I don't see how it can only be in the 80s in your part of the country. It feels like it's in steam bath weather here.
Yeah. I don't know. I think here in the Northeast, because I'm in the Great Lakes area, basically, we have a fair degree of humidity, but maybe since I've grown up here, I'm just accustomed to it.
Well, I have spent half my life in this fair city, and I will never be accustomed to it.
But I've to a point, I am adjusting. I mean, I used to be the sort that would always have a fan on at my desk at work.
Mm-hmm.
And since I've been dieting, I have noticed that I'm not needing it as much. In fact, I'm starting to see what the twig folk were talking about with it being too cold there.
Well, yes, a certain amount of that body, the body cushion also makes you very warm.
It does, and it doesn't help any that this is benefiting Hubby Billy's argument for not getting air conditioning in our 55-year-old house.
Oh, that's really...
Yeah, he grew up in a similarly older house, and there was not central air either. So he's for years he's been trying to brainwash me into thinking it's not so bad. You just get through it with fans and have your windows open, and before you know it, you won't need them anymore. Okay, well, maybe I'm agreeing a little bit more with him because I'm down 65 pounds, but It still doesn't mean that I don't keep asking if to go to Best Buy and buy some air conditioners.
Oh, fans work really well,
Hmm.
especially if you've got several of them pointed right at you and no one else is around.
And I have one right behind my laptop right now.
Hmm. Well, that should keep your laptop cool.
So today's episode is brought to you by Greek yogurt and fruit, almonds, and some cinnamon. It's what's for snack.
Mm. And you must buy your yogurt by the pint or half gallon or whatever.
We get the large tubs,
Yeah.
and our store has a package deal where you get two.
Mm.
But we always have to open the carton to check because we've had one or two that have been burped in the processing. So you get product all over the inside of your carton. If you're not careful, you just, you don't notice it until it's in your shopping bag.
Yeah, that would be bad.
Mm-hmm. So are we almost ready, Duchess?
I think we're as ready as I'm going to be.
Alright.
I may be a little on the wing today, and dropping things.
Well, the handmaidens had just recently awoken her from her fainting couch. So, okay. Well, thank
Okay.
you very much for your patience, ladies and gentlemen, and transgendered species in between. We are going to get underway here.
Alrighty.
Just out of reach. Here you go. An enchanted land, a far away nearby.
You do that again.
There is a place, just out of reach, where we go to escape. An enchanted land, a far away nearby.
Out in the faraway nearby, can you hear my call? Out in the faraway nearby, I'm thinking around the world, still you're here to stay. Out from the faraway.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Duchess Sue. Hello, welcome to the Faraway Nearby. I am DJ Starsage, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, the Duchess Sue. Hello, Sue. How are you?
I'm pretty good. And yourself?
I'm doing quite well.
You just said that, didn't you? I am a little confused today, so if everyone will just bear with me.
Well, as I was saying, the Duchess must have been helped up from her fainting couch.
It's true.
And it's so nice that those lovely young ladies aren't as cross with you as they used to be. I guess you've given them a raise.
They might have been.
Minimum wage affects even the land of far and near.
It does. It's amazing.
So we are at a milestone, Duchess. This is episode 30. Can you believe it?
Well, some days and some days not so much.
Oh, well, it wasn't so long ago that I was taking another look at doing podcasting because I tried my hand at it and I did a handful of solo episodes by myself. I've hidden them well. You can't find them. And then when I decided I'd like to try it again, I said, you know what? I'm going to ask my best friend to do this because we can clearly while away the hour in no time.
Well, it's true. You and I can talk about just about anything for just about forever.
One time we made a pot of tea last 3 hours.
Yes, at least. Are you sure we didn't delve into a second pot, though?
Well, I think that's a magical teapot. It refills itself. It's kind of like one of those biblical stories where, the baskets of bread refilled themselves.
Well, yes, that I try to have that always.
Mm-hmm. So, This is a live show, and for those of you in the chat room, our video is available on YouTube. Just search for the Faraway Nearby podcast. And so far, it looks like we have the Shy Yeti, Toppy Smelly, Veritable Virgo, and we are visited by an extraterrestrial. We have Ick the Alien.
Oh, yeah? Ick the Alien?
Yes, Ick is one of the resident characters of the Shy Life podcast.
Oh, yes.
He was good enough, or kind enough rather, to keep the Shy Yeti company once the original troupe had gone on their way.
Oh, well. Well, that was kind of.
Yes, so it's been a little while since we've had a chance to sit down and chat. The Duchess and I will catch up with what's been going on lately. And our last episode, if you haven't already checked it out, we did an interview with Baron Frosty, and that was quite fun. We talked about travel, we talked about childhood, and we talked about ambitions, and we reviewed a little bit of his writing plans and some of his projects that are out. And Ick is waving to us in the chat room.
Yes, I was noticing that. I was going to respond to him here.
Oh,
perhaps.
The Duchess is throwing the royal wave.
That's me.
So we will talk about our weeks in just a moment here. Now, I usually have you go first, but would you rather that I go first so you can collect your thoughts?
That would be good.
Okay, so here we go. We're going to talk about our weeks.
Even the bad times are good. Soon as I get to you, baby, you just gotta hold me, and even the bad times are good.
Okay, so it has been an interesting summer so far. I continue on my diet, and I am down by 65 pounds. And this won't be all about dieting. I know that some people get tired of hearing about it. We are in the planning stages for several different activities we're going to be doing this summer, Billy and I. We have a couple of family reunions coming up. And that should prove interesting because I've recently learned that there is sort of a diamond in the rough that I've just learned about. It is and this is going to sound creepy, but interesting people, interesting stories. Being the genealogy nerd that I am, along with a sci-fi nerd, whenever I can find a new piece of information about the past, I just want to dig into it like I'm somebody on a treasure hunt in the library. And I've recently learned that there is a little country cemetery, and it's situated not far from one of the reunions I'm going to be going to in a couple of weeks. So what makes it interesting about that is there is a website called findagrave.com, and it's sort of the Facebook of cemeteries. That sounds a little bit morbid, but you know, as generations go by, families move, and you know, you probably couldn't tell me what your great grandmother might have done, or where she grew up, or you know, what her family was known for. But if you can follow your family's history, you get to learn things. And so, this cemetery that I'm going to be going to has several people in it from my grandfather's family, or at least they have the same last name. And I'm at the point where I'm trying to piece together missing links. You know, I know who in this case, I think my 3 times great grandfather was. And I knew he was born in Vermont, but I don't know who his parents were because he wasn't buried with them. So in this particular cemetery, I'm hoping to find some names that might fill in some of those blanks. So that should be exciting. And that is our 15-minute mark. I'll just go on for a couple more minutes here, and then we'll turn things over to the Duchess. And so, you know, that's something I'm looking forward to. cemeteries are very fascinating because of the level of detail and artwork that goes into some of those old headstones. Never mind the fact also that when a lot of people in historical societies catalog cemeteries, they'll go through and oftentimes they'll only have the prominent headstones there. You know, maybe they're on their lunch break or something and just writing down a quick few things. But if you wander around enough, you'll see in-laws buried with each other and, you know, children buried with them and grandparents. And then because of the names, you can put two and two together and think, oh, well, this is so-and-so's grandmother. And you realize, you know, where the puzzle pieces come together on that. So it's interesting because in that part of the state, my grandfather didn't grow up there. He grew up in Pennsylvania. But I guess if you look at a map, they had to have stopped somewhere on the way from Vermont to Pennsylvania. So I guess they spent some time here in the Excelsior state. So we have another family reunion at the end of the month, next month. And it's also Billy and my wedding anniversary. It was 7 years ago in August that we got married. We got our marriage license just the month to the date from when the state Senate enacted marriage equality in the state of New York. So we were actually in line at the town clerk office to be one of the first people to get a marriage license application.
Cool.
So, of course, being what it is with planning, I'm not going to exactly get to do what I wanted for our wedding anniversary, which was to go to Niagara Falls. We're going to end up rubbing elbows with the folks in the haystack so that we can be here for my family reunion. And this is more of a favor to my my favorite aunt, and pardon me, I'm forgetting her name at the moment. I know it was a celebrated lady in folklore. It wasn't Lady Godiva, though. My aunt was not riding a horse in the buff. But we do have
Wouldn't that have been exciting?
Well, she does have quite a story for being a spirited woman. When we were at my grandmother's house a number of years back after she'd passed away, we were going through some family photographs and something triggered a memory with my aunt, and she decided to tell this story where she was married to her first husband at the time. You know that's a story from her glory days when she tells you it was when she was married to her first husband, because she's been married 4 times. But she told this story about her car breaking down on a steep hill, and she had a standard transmission. And this may have been in the winter, so of course that added to the excitement. And she was on her way home to her husband from the store, I think, and her car broke down, and she ended up having to hitchhike with a truck driver because that was the next person who came along who saw her thumbing for a ride. So of course, the exciting part about that was thinking about my aunt in her glory day, getting married in her early 20s, whose car is broken down, and now she's thumbing for a ride, and you know, some possibly creepy character comes up. He's like, "Hey, lady, you want to ride?" But it wasn't a red van, and she lived to tell the tale. So, but yes, we'll talk more about summer stories. That's what our episode's about today, is the glory of summer. And I have some coming up plans that I will talk about in a little bit here. So, Duchess, I think that I should turn the reins over to you. What have you been up to, and what's going on in your summer?
Well, I haven't been up to much. Cleo and I have launched our YouTube channel, and that's going well, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The Duke and I are getting ready to move, if we can find an appropriate place to move to.
Now, this is all part of that witless protection program that you're in, right?
Yes, the witless protection program, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, we are making an attempt. We also would like a little more space. We are going to be taking on some more servants and perhaps some family moving in with us, so we need more space.
Oh, so you're thinking of a joint living arrangement?
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, okay. Well, that might be helpful because I know that you've spoken before about having your granddaughters help out
Hmm.
since you have a few troubles.
Yeah, so Cleo is actually considering joining us in our household on a more permanent basis
Oh.
or semi-permanent basis,
Mm-hmm.
something of that nature. So that is all going real well. And other than that, and it being extraordinarily warm this summer in this fair state, there's really not much going on here.
Now, if I can turn the pages back a couple of weeks maybe, it wasn't long ago that you told me that you had a ladies' night out, and I know that it's not been recent enough that I'm going to expect you to have any sort of notes or anything, but this is one of those activities that the Duchess talks about from time to time. So, for our listeners who may not have heard before, tell them a little bit about your ladies' night and going out with your friends.
Well, actually, this was constructed by or desired by my daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and we have well, we call her a cousin. She was actually married to a cousin of mine who had since passed, and so she's probably 10 years older than I am, maybe more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, since I am the youngest grandchild or child or whatever in both sides of the family, there's a whole lot of people that have come and gone that are like my first cousins that I have no idea who they are, and they're all somewhere else. But Judy is one of the few people that are left here in Lincoln, and we have been and so we at my daughter's request, we've been going out with her and another woman from Mama's church, both of whom are not Mama, but
Mama Bear.
Mama Bear and I are both left-leaning politically, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
and my cousin and this other woman from Mama Bear's church are both kind of right-leaning. And I keep thinking, if I really want to keep submitting myself to this kind of torture.
I'm sorry. In tribute to the Shy Yeti being in the chat room, I have to say, in the background of my mind, as you're telling me you're on different political sides, I'm thinking the song is London Bridge is falling down.
Oh, that's terrible. But yeah. I at least managed to get Mama Bear to understand a little more about politics in our fair country, but than I think many of my other relatives do.
Mm-hmm.
But and I am told, and I have believed this most of my life, that you should converse with people that you don't necessarily agree with.
Right.
That way you get various points of view, and they get various points of view, and perhaps you don't have to have free-for-alls and shooting battles and such. But I sometimes find it a little hard to put up with since our most recent presidential elections.
Oh, yes, understandable. So, so what have you met up with your ladies group the other week, and where did you go? What did you have for your meal out?
Oh, we always go to Applebee's for free wings. Well, they aren't free, but for cheap wings.
Oh, okay.
Because
Now,
they're the peasants, of course,
Mm-hmm.
have to be accounted for.
Oh, yes. Well, the peasants do have some of the best food, though.
It's true.
I do hear that the buffalo wings actually were constructed because somebody was trying to put together a quick snack on a budget.
I, I believe that's true, and it seems to me that they were created originally in Albany.
Possibly. So, is there a favorite drink that you imbibe?
A favorite what?
A favorite beverage, an adult
Oh
beverage?
yes, an adult beverage. Oh yes, of course we drink the margaritas. The house margarita that are mixed up by the bucket the night
Ooh.
before.
Uh-huh. Are these any particular flavor, like strawberry or
No,
no? They're just
just the straight alcohol. I
oh,
think you can get them flavored. I just don't.
so they're a traditional margarita, and I think
Yeah,
that traditional margaritas possibly have lime in them.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember one of the first times that I was old enough to drink that I did actually get drunk. And this was after my ex and I moved to Dallas, Texas. And what I swear is one of the hottest summers. I got off of that airplane, never having been to Texas. And this is at Dallas Love Field, the place
Hmm.
to hear about when you watched J.R. Ewing. And I swear my feet were going to melt to the asphalt as soon as I touched the ground. It was that hot out. My face just felt like I was in Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, and it was no air conditioning day. But we had a favorite neighborhood watering hole that we went to called the Hideaway Club, which I think is still in Dallas.
Hmm.
But basically, it was a piano bar, neighborhood piano bar that sat narrow-ways on its property. There was a front bar and a back bar, and I think there was a pool table at the back bar. And they used to do cookouts on this patio they had in between. Of course, then somebody had to speak up, and the days were gone when people could bring their own steaks to cook. And you had to have gloves, and there had to be a cover charge and all that. But anyways, that was one of the first times that I got drunk was on what might be called classic or traditional margaritas, and I think in Texas they make those with tequila. And
Yeah, that's
I'll,
possible.
I'll never forget because I don't think the air conditioning was working in our car either, and we lived on the opposite end of town, and we had to work the next day. We got halfway home, which was a good 20 to 30 minutes in traffic in Dallas, and my now ex said, "Oh no." And I went, "What? What? Oh no. I think I left my wallet at the bar." So we had to go back. I tell you, I felt like rolling down the window and throwing up.
You might have felt better if you had.
Possibly. So I don't mind tequila, but it's not one of my fonder earlier legal age moments.
Well, I'm pretty certain these are not made with tequila. These are made with vodka
Okay, maybe
because
so.
this fair state is sort of a traditional.
Yeah, and what do they call now? I don't remember if this was the case in Colorado, but my ex was of an age difference enough that he remembered the days when the drinking age was lower, and he talked about some states have a lower alcohol content beer, and I want to say it's called 3-2.
3-2 in Colorado was one of those states.
I see. Yes, I remember that now. And it's called 3-2 because it's 3.2% alcohol. And I do believe in at least
In beer, it's not necessarily true in all beverages. I think
right.
they also make a wine that is like
But
that.
that's considered to be a low alcohol content, considering when I go to a store here in New York, most beers are 4.5 or 5% alcohol.
Yeah.
So, but also I remember from my years in Colorado that it used to be that liquor stores were not allowed to be open on Sunday, and that was changed at least a year or two before I left, and so that's been at least 8-9 years ago now.
Really? I don't remember Colorado ever having closed Sunday closure.
And maybe it wasn't closed, maybe that they were only allowed to be open certain hours, so maybe the liquor store had to be closed by like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I think.
I don't know.
halfway mark. We have plenty of time though, because there's no one on after us today.
Ooh.
So you're planning on moving, and you're going to be changing your living arrangement, having a granddaughter moving in. You've been out with your lady friends, and so I guess you'd say that the highlight was ladies' night,
Mm,
or was it that your granddaughter's moving in?
I think the highlight is that we actually started our little YouTube
Well, that's right.
our account group
Mhm.
show, whatever it is.
Did you want to remind our listeners what's that?
Well,
What that?
yes, it's called Bits and Bobs, or Bits and Bob, I think.
And there's several with a similar name out there. So if you look for the Treehouse in the Courtyard, the Faraway Nearby's official Facebook group, the Duchess has been kind enough to place a link there. And also, if you look for TFN Sue Duchess on Facebook, she'll have links on her profile.
Yes, we are also talking to people on Facebook and Twitter at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And haven't you just recently posted your third episode?
Yes, we posted our third episode Wednesday. We
Excellent.
post Wednesdays at 5 p.m.
Wonderful. So to wrap up the peaks and valleys, the high point of my week recently has been being able to tolerate the heat a little bit more since I've lost some weight. And I think the valley, well, it didn't happen this week, but that's going to be having to go to a family reunion instead of Niagara Falls. And
You'll make Niagara Falls one of these days.
Yeah, so we'll go into our next segment here.
Even the bad times are good. Soon as I get to you, baby, you just gotta hold me, and even the bad times are good.
So catching up to the chat room earlier when the Duchess was talking about moving coming up, Ick the Alien said that you'd be welcome to use his UFO, but he's been having problems with the invisibility cloak lately.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to using that.
And then Toppy has asked for somebody to catch my throw up comment. So moving along here, Duchess, you were able to get into our notes for today, right?
No, not actually, but I have some idea what we're doing. So,
okay. So we're going to devote today's episode to talking about all things summer. And so there are just certain things that you associate with the summer. And, I have to change screens here. Bear with me. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. Okay.
Never.
So there are just certain things that you associate with this time of year. That, of course, is an ice cream truck. And I grew up out in the country, and I do believe the Duchess did as well. But did you have ice cream trucks when you were growing up? Did they roll through your neighborhood?
No.
No?
No, you had to walk. You had to walk to town, all of like 2 or 3 blocks to get ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't come to you, unfortunately. I think that's a city thing.
I think so too. I didn't have it where I grew up. Now, we did have something different though. Now, for a portion of my childhood, I lived in a trailer park, and not saying there's anything wrong with that, but in my defense, my parents were between stick-built houses. My dad was a building contractor, so whenever they talked about memories of the past, that's how they would justify it. They would say, we only lived there for a couple of years while we were planning on building our next house. But, being in a close-knit neighborhood like that, you were always prone to certain interruptions. And of course, we had delivery trucks. Now, we didn't have an ice cream truck that I remember. Of course, I was only like 5 or 6 at the time. But we had a phenomenon that in the Northeast, and Toppy might be able to attest to this, it was the Schwann's truck. Now, I'm not sure if I'm spelling it right. It's SCHWANN. And of course, their logo is a swan on the side of their
Mhm.
truck. But they were a food service delivery vehicle. You could order from them, and they would fill your freezer, so you could get little pizzas and onion rings and anything you could stick in your freezer. So that's as close to a memory of an ice cream truck as I have. And I actually ended up going to college one semester with a gal who, in I want to say, my psychology class, told me that her dad was like the head of the company for that region. And I just thought, oh, okay, that, and a quarter of a cup of coffee. Oh, so Jimmy Bear has joined us in the chat room, and he said when he lived in northern Vermont, we had a Schwann's. Well,
Yes.
welcome, Jimmy Bear. I was talking a little bit ago about having ancestors who lived in the fair state of Vermont, and I'm trying to figure out what part, because of course this was before the Civil War, so I don't exactly think that it was, on the guest register at the, at well, whatever you want to call it, the Chapel of Love. Uh, so my nephews did have ice cream trucks, and they grew up during the 90s. And this is one of those things. My poor sister Betty, she and her husband both worked factory jobs after my brother-in-law got out of his 4 years with the Marines.
Mhm.
And, he couldn't find another job, and he ended up taking this one at a company that made television sets at the time. And I guess they both worked opposite shifts. So more often than not, the TV was the babysitter for my nephews. And they are fine young men nowadays. They certainly have grown into their own. They both take care of their parents. Not that either of my sister or brother-in-law are in their twilight. I just mean that they're helping out where they can with household expenses and whatnot. But anyways, my nephews grew up in such a climate, I guess you'd say, where they would drive by a McDonald's and they would just whine, "Mom, Mom, please pull over, please." And my sister would just cave. And I guess at some point she did have to have a coming to on that, because it wasn't helping out, with their livelihood. But I remember when my nephews were young and I would go visit, and they had an ice cream truck that would go through the neighborhood, and you knew the tune that it would play. And in fact,
Yeah.
that I think they were talking about this on Lotzel not long ago, if I'm not mistaken. It seems like every ice cream truck plays, pardon the terminology, but something of pedophile-ish music. It's always some sort of a merry-go-round or a music box, and they always have
Yeah.
strange names like you would see in a horror movie, like Mr. Tasty or Mr. Snow. Well, ours was Hokey Pokey.
Really?
And so I wouldn't be surprised if the first words my nephews learned were Hokey Pokey.
Well, that should have been about the time for the song to have been very popular, wouldn't it have been?
I'm not sure. I remember learning the Hokey Pokey when I was young in the 80s. I think that maybe it had something to do with the generation of the guy who ran that business.
Could be.
But Jimmy Bear is saying that in his neighborhood, the ice cream truck plays Turkey in the Straw. So we have a few things to talk about with summer. Ice cream trucks are just one of them. And one of the things that we'll move along and talk about here are swimming pools. Now, Duchess, did you guys have a pool at your home, or did you go to the school to use the pool?
Well, both of those things are really funny. The particular area that I grew up in did not have a pool in the school. They didn't have a pool in town. If you wanted to go to a pool, you had to go to the next town over. It was about 10 miles away. However, we did have a river. We had two rivers that came together. The Great St. Vrain, north and south, met in our town and provided us with a really fantastic swimming hole. It was cool, but not too cold, not usually. And the park department had set it up so that there was, well, the park department, the local firemen, I think, the volunteer fire department had gotten together and moved some rocks and things around, so it was fairly deep. And there was a little cliff you could jump off of and pretend like you were in Mexico and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you wouldn't be hitting your head on any rocks or anything underneath.
Oh, it was that deep.
It was, oh yeah, it was very deep. The rest of the river is like about 2 inches.
Right. If I remember right, when we were talking about our favorite things last fall, in our special about favorite things, you said that one of your favorite things to do was to lay in the grass and read a book. And now, did you do that quite often when you were playing at this water hole?
Oh no, there was no grass there.
Oh,
rocks.
So that would have been your perfect holodeck memory, is if there were a grassy area next to that river.
I did like to, and would still, if we were in the area, like to curl up leaning against a dead tree kind of thing and read books next with the sound of the water trickling by. Like I say, the river itself is probably only, I don't know, a few inches, maybe 6 inches deep.
Mm-hmm.
It goes on as a joined river. It goes on and runs through Denver, but the two rivers join together, and where they join together is where they had put this spot in the park where there's this very deep area, but most of the river is too shallow to do inner tubing on.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, though, isn't that one of the rivers that comes together? It's a tributary to the Colorado River?
I'm not real sure.
Oh, well, a lot of them are, but yeah.
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
For our nature and history buffs out there, that's the river that is credited with carving out the Grand Canyon.
The Colorado, yes. And it still runs at the bottom of the Grand Canyon.
Mm-hmm.
You can go rafting through that. I wouldn't go rafting on either of the St. Vrain rivers. I don't think there, except for our watering hole, I don't think there's any of it that's deep enough to go rafting. Now, the Big Thompson, north of Loveland, I think, is a deeper river.
Mm-hmm.
You could do that, but
right. So, in my growings up here, I don't know if that's actually even proper English, but when I was a child, I was also in a similarly small town, and we didn't have a pool. As I said, I lived in a trailer park for a short time as a kid, and we usually lived in neighborhoods, so there weren't any pools during that time. I had neighbors that had pools, but if you can imagine, I was the little chubby kid, and I was also the youngest in my family, so when everybody grew up, they left little Butterball at home with mom and dad, and little Butterball was afraid of going out in public to pools because little boys don't wear shirts at the pool. So, this little boy ended up going to public pools with his mother because she wanted me to learn how to swim. And I can at least joggy paddle. I'm not an accomplished swimmer. But in my defense, I also had a variety of health problems as a child. I had some severe allergies that resulted in me having to have ear surgeries. So I pretty much had to avoid, being in the water for long periods. But my grandparents also decided that in their later years, they were going to buy a cottage near a lake so that the grandkids would come and visit. And that sort of backfired. I know I've talked a little about this in the past, but basically, my grandparents moved near this lake for the grandkids, and
Mhm.
I don't think they could have picked a dirtier lake. uh, it's something where in more recent years I've read back and I found out that Cromwell University has actually done some research in that lake. And
Mhm.
after I left the state of New York, they discovered that the reason why they've had so much trouble with trying to remove the weeds from the lake was that in this part of the state, the Finger Lakes, there are so many people that will bring their vacation equipment, their boats, down from the Great Lakes and come to the Finger Lakes, and you bring all sorts of foreign life matter to the area.
Yeah.
So they had a resistant strain of weeds growing in an inland lake that they didn't know how to treat because that variety of plant life was not native to the area. So once they identified the species, as Mr. Spock would say, they are able to eradicate it.
That seems appropriate. Yeah.
But of course, it was years after I was of age to enjoy it. So, but bum. Womp womp. So yeah, I went to the school pool with mom, and we didn't even have our own pool at my school. This is just desserts. After I graduated high school, my school had already merged with another district, but
Mm.
after that, they decided, let's spend some state money and we're going to improve the building. So now what used to be my gymnasium is now the swimming pool for the school. And whereas they had to cancel the gymnastic program before because of insurance expense, now supposedly my my alma mater has a football team.
Oh.
So let's see here. What else do we have to talk about with the summer? Okay, yes. Let me go ahead and grab this little goodie here.
This summer, in a world, viewer discretion is advised.
We are talking about movies. I wanted to cue a projector there, but I didn't have one handy. So the Duchess and I were talking as we were in the planning stages for today's episode about drive-in movies. Now, the Duchess was a little bit surprised that I knew anything about drive-in movies because, let's face it, that was the heyday of the movie era. You know, America's love affair with the car, and then naturally we progress into outdoor movies. But of course, there are some areas of the country that still have this phenomenon. So, Duchess, I think this is something that you may be able to speak more about. Tell us about your movie going experience as a kid. I know you maybe didn't get to go to the movies a whole lot, but tell us about some of your adventures out.
Actually, we got to go to the movies a lot when I was a child, when my father was still alive. He died when I was 13, so obviously that was limited the amount of time, but he left the movies. And interestingly enough, we didn't have a real grocery store in the town I grew up in. So usually on Saturdays, we would go to town and buy groceries. And for some reason, our family would be driving home around dusk and looking off to the west, I believe, might have been the south. You could see the theater or the movie theaters on, because that's where the drive-in movie was. And my dad would be driving along and he'd say, "That looks really good. Let's go see that." So, like many of the movies I've saw in my childhood, we would go and get in the middle of the first movie. These were always double features at the drive-in,
Mm-hmm.
and shortly I would go to sleep, and I suppose folks stayed awake. I don't know. My siblings may also have stayed awake. I think I just slept through most of these things and would wake up in time to see people shoot one another and things of that nature. Uh, and then sometime, probably before the second movie ended, my father decided it was time to go home and we'd go home. So I'm not sure I ever saw two whole movies in a row, but I saw the equivalent of a whole movie because we'd see bits and pieces of two. Uh, but it was just unlike the drive-in movies in towns where they tended to be surrounded by tall fences and what have you, so it was really hard to see the screen, let alone to hear anything. The drive-in theater in the little shopping town that we lived next to was wide open. You could see this. You could see the screen for miles.
Mm-hmm.
And if you lived next door, you could sit or fairly close to it. I don't know how far you'd have to live from it, but you could live a couple blocks from it, I'm sure, and sit in your backyard and watch the movie and understand what was going on. You hear the dialogue and everything.
Oh yeah,
So-
well, I know in later years, I know it started out with a lot of drive-in theaters having the little speakers on the poles, but
yeah.
later years they started broadcasting the audio onto a radio station.
Hmm.
So that's one of the things we used to do is if we weren't going to the movies, when we would drive by the theater, we would put the radio station on so that we could tell what movie was playing.
I did not go to drive-ins at that point. We were still at the point where they had those little metal things that you hung on the inside of your window.
Okay.
You'd roll the driver's or passenger window up about halfway, and there would be this little metal thing that would come inside and hang off the side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the kids would all run around and go to the there was a little place where the movies were projected from, and that had a snack bar kind of thing where you could go get things to eat. Just like that. And
So I was going.
kids would run around outside the park most of the night, and the adults actually watched the movies.
I was going to say there weren't a terrible lot of drive-ins in my neck of the woods, but there were two, and of course, coincidentally, they are in opposite directions. One of them has, in more recent years, actually closed down, and I think they've turned it into a used car lot. But I remember in the late 90s when Star Trek Generations had come out, I drove in the area that this other drive-in was at, and it's kind of in a hilly area, but it was perfect because although you don't normally want to see a movie at the drive-in when it's foggy out, this particular movie, it sort of added to the ambiance. It was a scene of Star Trek Generations when the ship had been hit, they were in a battle, and the ship is separating, and the Enterprise saucer section is crash landing on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you get to see a Star Trek movie or a movie with any sort of space fights in it, it's best to see it on the big screen because you're going to see the ship as close to the real size it's going to be. So
Yeah.
imagine that was like a 3D movie experience. I'm sitting there in a foggy field looking up at the drive-in screen, and here the saucer section of Enterprise D is coming through the atmosphere and crash landing, and all the fog around it kind of matches what's on the screen.
Uh-huh. And it landed right on the hood of your car, right?
And in the chat room, they're saying in the 80s, one of the drive-ins in his area closed and reopened as an X-rated drive-in. Oh boy.
Yeah, that would have been interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever saw an X-rated drive-in.
Uh-huh.
That really
I
would
bet you
have
that
been
one
interesting.
I bet you that one has tall fences for the neighborhood.
I would think so.
So although we're getting close to the top of the hour, we're going to run over a little because there isn't another show on until 7. So this will give us an opportunity to talk about the movies that we were going to talk about.
Oh,
now.
that's right. I was going to say I went through a number of them.
So we were talking about drive-in movies being an iconic part of summer for a lot of people, and I thought part of that we would talk about movies that came out during important times in our lives. So we're going to start off with talking about the summer blockbusters that came out when the Duchess was her sweet 16. So we made a little list between each other. And Duchess, what movie came out when you were 16?
When I was 16, that would have been, I believe, Romeo and Juliet. I'm not sure that was a summer movie. It might have been a Christmas movie more likely, but I do remember seeing it, not at a drive-in. We were back taking care of my grandmother by then, and my father had passed away. So I saw that movie with my mother, of all people.
Oh.
It seemed ironic to me at the time, but
right. Now, another movie that came out the year you were 16 was Bonnie and Clyde with Warren Beatty,
yes.
Dunaway, and Hackman. Now, I don't know if you saw it when it first came out, but do you remember that movie?
Oh, yes, I remember, and I did see that. I saw that. I actually had a date for that movie, other than my mother. There again, I didn't see it in a drive-in, I don't believe. I think I saw that at the Cooper Lincoln, one of those big alleged three-screen theaters.
Ooh, a multiplex.
Yeah. Those things usually gave me this headaches. I also saw How the West Was Won that way.
Okay.
Which was an interesting way to view that particular movie.
Right. Now, of course, some of the trivia about the cast of Bonnie and Clyde was that Warren Beatty later on would play Dick Tracy and a number of other roles. But of course, Faye Dunaway is most well known as playing Mommy Dearest. And of course, Gene Hackman has had in many number of roles, including he played Lex Luthor in the 80s Superman movies. And another movie that came out, let's see. Oh, moving on here, when you were 18, so in some states you're of legal age to leave home by then, but depending on where you lived, the drinking age may have been 18 or 19. We'll get to that, but in the summer that you were 18, it was the summer of love. It was 69, and one of the movies that came out, and you and I talked about this movie. It had Jon Voight and Dustin Hoffman. Now, before we actually get your answer, let's poll the chat room. Does anybody out there know what movie came out in 69 that had Jon Voight and Dustin Hoffman? I know there's a 7-second delay, so we'll see which one of you can come up with the answer. Now, my money is on Toppy Smelly. I think that Toppy will know what movie came out in the summer of 69 with Jon Voight and Dustin Hoffman.
Well, 20 years later, apparently the Dead Poets Society came out. Yes.
You have part of the name right. Cowboy is in the title. Now, I think that's actually...
Oh, yes, this is a different cowboy movie.
Right. Now, the name that you're giving me, I think, is the title of a song.
No, there's also a movie by that name.
Okay. Jimmy Bear.
And Jimmy Bear has gotten our movie.
Yay! Let me see if I have that.
That's a very dark movie, actually.
I've been meaning to see it, and it is on my watch list because I love classic films, and I'm sorry. It was made before I was born. I wouldn't normally call a movie from that era a classic film because it's not black and white. And yes, I do watch black and white movies, unlike
they're wonderful.
So
But
let's.
yes, that was 69 was a year of a lot of really fantastic movies.
Yeah, it was hard pressed to find just a couple of iconic movies, but I wanted ones that came out just in the summer since we're sitting here with fans on and wondering if we're going to survive.
Mhm.
So moving on, unless do you have a special memory of Midnight Cowboy, Duchess?
Mm,
Was that one of the ones another one of the ones you
no,
had?
I saw that in the fall.
Okay.
I
No,
saw that with Mary Margaret, I think, and her little brother.
okay.
Um,
I
but
think it's the next movie that you had a special memory of. Shall I move on to your next movie?
sure, I'm not
Okay.
sure which list you have.
One that's never note, my dear.
I know.
So I'm doing milestones. So we talked about when you were 16, then 18, and then of course the next milestone is when you were 21. So in 1972, when the Duchess was 21, in that summer, a very interesting movie came out.
1972 was the most or my 21st birthday was the most disappointing year of
Oh,
all.
well, you can tell us about that. I'm going to poll the chat room. So
Okay.
in the summer of 72, a very special and unique movie came out with a very special and unique talent, Miss Goldie Hawn,
Mm.
and also starred a very young man from Green Acres fame, Eddie Albert. So, similarly, if we could put our minds together here, who starred in a summer film in 1970? Well, actually, you know who starred in it. What was the name of the movie starring Goldie Hawn and Eddie Albert that came out in the summer of 72? And Jimmy Bear has it again.
We must have us some movie buff.
Yes, butterflies are free. Oh, Toppy says that he would love for you to talk extensively about the experiences from the 60s.
Well,
So we could devote a whole. I think that we could get you and Toppy in together on that.
we could.
I realize that.
Now,
Toppy,
mind you, I graduated from high school in 69.
right.
So it wasn't exactly the 60s. It was sort of more the 70s. But for some reason, I think everybody refers to that period from like 65 to 75 as the 60s.
Now, I know I'm quoting a song here, but isn't that the age of Aquarius?
Yes, it is. Yes,
Okay.
it is. Sorry. That, of course, is from a Broadway musical. And I'm going to remember the name of it.
Well, so to answer the question, the movie we were talking about was Butterflies Are Free, came out when the Duchess was 21. And now you're thinking of the Broadway play that The Age of Aquarius came out on now. I know of it from a popular band of that era as well. Wasn't it the Mamas and the Papas that sang about The Age of Aquarius?
Well, they might have. A number of people covered that particular song.
They're probably not the originators of it then.
No, and I'm thinking that I may have this wrong. Did that come out of Jesus Christ?
Toppy is saying Hair.
Oh, it came. Oh, of course, it came from here. Yeah, I was thinking it came from Jesus Christ Superstar.
Now, didn't you tell me you have a special memory of Butterflies Are Free? Didn't you tell me that you had a date to go to see that?
I had a date. Again, not my mother and not the gentleman I saw in the earlier aforementioned movie. But yes, and it was. But this was wintertime when we saw Butterflies Are Free. I went to the movie with a young man named Peter. And it was winter, it was cold, and we were standing in line in front of the Stewart Theater. Every town has a theater named Stewart, right?
Right.
Especially university towns. And there was a young lady in front of us, also there with a date, I believe. And she had this really gorgeous furry coat, and it had a hood on it with a really nice, one of those really nice little banded furry things. And Peter kept sticking his nose in her coat, in that fur, the band of fur around her hood, because she had it off her head.
Oh wait,
And
no. So your date was smelling another lady's coat?
yes, he would stick his nose into that fur that was around the top, the front, what would have been the front of the hood, except she had it thrown back, and then he'd rub his nose in it because it was so cold outside. And I would, every once in a while, would put my hands up around my on my face and breathe into them to try and warm up my face. But he thought this was a better solution of just rubbing his nose into and front of his face into her fur on her coat. It was a beautiful coat, and it did look nice and soft, but I thought that was terrible. I would not have wanted to have been assaulted that way.
Right. Well, and I think you told me that much like your ladies group, you were having company with somebody of a different political leaning.
This is also true. Yes, Peter was a rampant Republican, a pro-Nixon person. But of course, that was when we thought Nixon was a really bad person, until we knew that there were people that could be worse.
Now, I'm guessing, did you not know his leanings before you two went out?
I sort of did, but
Oh,
I was
okay.
a freshman in college. He was a sophomore at the university. What the heck?
Right.
What,
So
he was paying. What did I care?
this was a chance opportunity. You wanted to see how it would work out.
Yeah, we went to see a movie. I went to see movies with lots of people that I liked even less than that I would like even less. Peter was actually a pretty nice guy. He just had his politics kind of turned lopsided.
So to the Duchess's credit, a little backstory here. Let's just say that Peter did not end up becoming the Duke.
This is true. The last I heard, he was in Florida, involved in some kind of politics down there, and God only knows what you can get up to in Florida.
So, he might have been one of those gentlemen whose wives have been smashed in the face with a pie.
It's possible. You never can tell.
Okay, so those were the milestones or the movies for the Duchess's milestones. So we're going to go ahead and move on to my growing up experience in the silver screen.
Now, these should be a little more recent, I do believe.
Oh, yes, they are. But, I'm not a millennial. I'm somewhere in between. No, we didn't go to the movies often when I was a child. I do remember we had a station wagon just before my siblings were old enough to be on their own. But there were quite a few years when we were living in that trailer park that my parents squished all four of us kids into the back seat of a Ford Fairmont, and that is a mid-sized sedan for those of you in the chat room.
Okay.
So let's just say we could not have held on to that car as the children grew into adulthood, because I think you could at most seat two people comfortably on that back seat.
Yeah.
Full-size people anyways. But we didn't go to the movies often, and this is aside from the milestone. I read a survey recently, and it was what was the first movie you remember going to? So this will give you a little idea of my age. I remember the first movie I was old enough to remember is I went to see Return of the Jedi, and it was at a movie theater in the shopping mall. And at the time, they had some toys out. Now, okay, I'm crossing my streams here. It wasn't Star Wars.
Okay.
At some point in the 80s, the Gremlins movie had come out, and I had to make a choice with birthday money. I was either going to buy a gizmo, which is a little alien creature in a cute little movie from the 80s about creatures that become evil when you feed them after midnight, or I could buy Cyndi Lauper's solo album, her debut. And my fate was sealed from there on, because if I had bought that Ewok and I had original today, I'd probably fetch some coin for that. Whereas the Cyndi Lauper album, not so much. I still love her more though than that Ewok doll, and I'm going to go see her in concert next weekend. So,
Oh, that sounds lots of fun.
yeah, I'll have something to report about that. But let's see. Dipping into my silver screen experience, I was 16 in 1993, and during that summer, there was a whole boatload of blockbuster movies. Just a short sampling of those were Jurassic Park. I can't remember the names of the actors in the film. I didn't write them down, but they were prominent people. We had Jeff Goldblum in that movie. I want to say Laura Dern. And then Sleepless in Seattle came out with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. And some would say that the movie in the 90s called You've Got Mail is just simply a remake of that movie. Two strangers who met by chance. And
that was just a remake of
Oh, Affair to Remember.
Yeah,
that was a classic film. That was I want to say that movie came out in the 50s.
I think so.
Yeah,
I have seen
romance
it a number of times, but I'm not entirely certain. And I think I've seen it in movie theater.
And let's see, another movie that came out in the summer of '93 was Hocus Pocus. And that is a cult classic. I mean, that was made by Disney, and it starred Bette Midler and Sarah Jessica Parker, who is Matthew Broderick's wife and star of the Sex and the City series. And then also comedian actress Kathy Najimy, who starred in a number of years on a TV series called Veronica's Closet, a sitcom about life in the fashion industry. And it had also Kirstie Alley. So Hocus Pocus has seen a recent resurgence, because Bette Midler has made appearances at award venues wearing a costume that was inspired by her character in that film. And there has been all sorts of interest in trying to get a sequel made. Now, of course, Bette Midler, being the upstanding lady that she is, would tell you that in a lot of the films she's played in, she has not been paid her worth. Women do not get paid the same as men, even today. And that's another reason why there won't be a sequel to The First Wives Club, because in protest to what they earned or possibly didn't, they refused to make a sequel. So who knows? I'm thinking it won't be long before, since Disney basically owns the rights to it, they will make a low-budget remake of the original for television, and then they'll probably have a TV series, something that would be like a direct-to-video kind of release. Let's see. Okay, so Jimmy Bear saying Eddie Albert was on Green Acres in the movie version of Oklahoma. The guy in Butterflies was his son. Okay, so that was when I was 16. Now, I will say I only ever went on a date with a young woman once, because you were talking about dates. And I went out on my only ever girl date to Look Who's Talking with not Sylvester Stallone. That would be a totally different movie. Somebody mentioned
it might be interesting though.
Right. I'm sorry. Who was the star of Grease and Saturday Night Fever?
I don't know. Another movie I have never seen.
Oh, John Travolta. Thank you, Toppy.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So Look Who's Talking.
There was in Grease.
Great. No, I've seen Grease.
Well, but I said he was in Grease. I thought he was in Saturday Night Live. I didn't think he was in.
No, he was in Grease.
Saturday Night Fever. Yes,
he was the guy that Olivia Newton-John's character fell in love with.
Oh, I'm not familiar with Grease or any of its iterations.
It is a phenomenon of its time. So, the first movie I took a date to was Look Who's Talking. And yes, I bought her a New Kids on the Block album that tells you the era that was. But
Oh, how just
so
sorry.
moving on to when I was 18 in 95, one of my favorite movies came out, and this is based on a true story, also starring Tom Hanks, just like Sleepless in Seattle and You've Got Mail. He's one of my favorite actors, by the way.
Mhm.
Apollo 13, which I
Oh,
do
yes.
believe was directed by Ron Howard.
Mhm.
And a little piece of trivia about that movie was the woman who played John Lovell's mother in the movie was actually Ron Howard's mother.
Oh, really? That's
Yes.
interesting.
Or it might actually have been his grandmother. But she had the line in
Oh.
the movie that if they could figure out how to make a washing machine fly, my Jimmy could land it. And then some other movies that came out in the summer of 95 when I was 18 was the oh shoot, I'm forgetting his name now. Kevin Costner. The Kevin Costner movie Waterworld. That was
Mhm.
one of those sleeper movies, I guess, because a lot of people say it cost a lot of money and didn't make that much and it wasn't that good a movie. I enjoyed it. It had Jean Triplehorn in it. She's a very versatile actress.
Yet
And
another movie I've never seen.
I think there's a few of them here. And then, of course, The Net came out with Sandra Bullock, and that was one of her first major roles. Of course, this is something that could be done nowadays because the paranoia has gotten even more pronounced with,
The Net.
yes, it was a movie about a woman who did beta testing for a software company,
Oh,
and her identity was stolen. Um, she was implicated in a series of crimes, and she had to go on the lam. She had to run and hide from the authorities because they thought that
yeah.
she was involved with a series of crimes. And so she had to uncover the fact that this major company that had produced a security standard, and they were sort of marketed as being like a Microsoft type company. They had a secret backdoor in their security system, which was allowing all these hackers to overtake corporate America.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
that sounds kind of
and
familiar. Yeah.
so this is a movie that could be redone today, I think.
Hmm.
And then lastly, when I was 21 in 1997, some of the movies that came out that summer were Men in Black, with, of course,
Now that's a
uh,
movie I've seen.
yes, with Will Smith in it.
Hmm.
And I think that was one of the first of his action film roles. Before that, he was just known for television, if I'm not mistaken. And then that same summer, one of my all-time favorite movies that's based on a novel by help me out here, the famous Cornell University astronomer Carl Sagan.
Carl
Carl
said, yeah.
Sagan, yeah. So one of my all-time favorite movies came out the summer I was 21. It was also the first movie I ever owned on DVD, and it was based on Carl Sagan's book, starring one of my favorite actresses, Jodie Foster, Contact. And then, of course, one of my other all-time favorite sci-fi movies, starring the ever-talented and versatile action film actress Mila Jovovich of the Resident Evil fame. It was The Fifth Element, which also starred Bruce Willis. So those were the movies that happened in the summers of my milestones. So we have a little bit to catch up on things, and I was just going to mention before we wind down and talk about whatever.
Hmm.
The Duchess was talking a little bit ago about the new YouTube channel that her granddaughter, and she have called Bits and Bobs. They're on their
Hmm.
third episode. And I also wanted to take this moment to announce that I have a solo project that I'm doing. The Duchess and I will continue doing the Far Away Nearby, but this is just a little peek into my day-to-day life. It's called Surely You Jest, and it's in the vein of you can't be serious, you must be kidding, because they stand for the Duchess's Jester, and they're just going to be
Hmm.
short little car recordings, about 10-15 minutes, and you can find that on iTunes under Surely You Jest. So Jimmy Bear is on his way. He says that hubby is waiting for dinner. I know that all too
Mhm.
well because I actually was supposed to be on my way out for dinner also with hubby. So goodbye, Jimmy
Well,
Bear.
we have to get you guys all going.
Yes. So I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to say, Duchess.
No, I don't think so. I have had a couple of really strange days the last few days, and I'm really pleased I could get here and all in one piece.
Well, we were glad that you
You
were able
know,
to join us because it would be an entirely different show if it was just me.
it's true. I have heard rumors of that,
Mm-hmm.
mostly from you.
Right. So,
But we will. I endeavor to hold up my end of it.
mm-hmm. So,
I miss DJ a lot, and it's not like he lives just next door and can bring me soup when I don't feel good,
right.
which is, of course, his job. Not that he's ever brought me soup when I didn't feel good, but you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the Duchess has a birthday coming up next month. So maybe you'll be good enough to put that on your Facebook profile so that our listeners can,
I might
say
consider
hello.
doing that.
Yeah.
I
And,
don't know. I'm getting ancient, you know.
well, it's only as old as the mystery.
It's true.
And I do believe Toppy Smelly has a birthday next month too, so you're in good company.
Oh, yeah? What part of the month does he have this birthday?
Well, we'll have to let Toppy tell you that. So I was just going to say before we head out here, folks, the Duchess and I will be recording one more episode before the fray of the summer. We normally do our show on the fourth Saturday of each month, but we are taking off some time for the summer. So we are going to go on hiatus after our next recorded episode, but we will be back in September. So Toppy is at the beginning of August.
Yeah, we're just 20 days apart.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well,
On the 13th, we could have a mutual party.
Yes. Alrighty, well, I'm going to let us go from here.
Okay.
And everybody enjoy your summer.
Yes, and it was wonderful seeing all of you.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Take care. You're supposed to wave.
Thank you for listening to Our Way Nearby.
Visit our webpage at tfnpodcast.com.
Find our fan page on Facebook and our companion blog on Tumblr.
This show is available on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher Radio.
Email us at tfnpodcast@gmail.com.
Follow us on Twitter at TFNDJ.
And call or text us at 720-230-6919. This show is a member of the Pride 48 Network.
Find other shows at pride48.com.
Okay, and everyone stay tuned. At 7 o'clock, you have the Voice of Turnip Style here on Pride 48. Okay, I have disconnected the stream, and let me stop the broadcast.